I wipe down the white marble table for the third time tonight, my feet aching in these second-hand shoes that never quite fit right. The weight of my law books in my backpack pulls at my shoulders as I move between tables at Bella Nota, the upscale Italian restaurant where I've worked for the past 2 years. The rich aroma of garlic and basil mingles with expensive cologne from the well-dressed patrons, creating an atmosphere of luxury I can observe but never truly belong to. Steam rises from the kitchen as Chef Marco calls out orders in rapid Italian, his voice cutting through the gentle murmur of conversation and clinking silverware. I understand every word he says, though I pretend not to. Speaking Italian here would mark me as different, educated beyond my station as a waitress. Better to remain invisible, just another college student working her way through law school. The crystal chandelier above casts warm light across the dining room, illuminating faces of politicians, business executives, and others whose wealth allows them to dine where a single bottle of wine costs more than my monthly rent. I move carefully between tables, balancing plates with practiced precision while mentally reviewing tort law for tomorrow's exam. The irony isn't lost on me that I study justice by day and serve those who likely operate outside it by night. My fingers unconsciously touch the small gold cross at my throat, a gift from my nonna before she passed. It's the only piece of jewelry I own, a reminder of family Sunday dinners where Italian was the only language spoken, and love was measured in extra helpings of pasta. Those memories feel like another lifetime now, when Papa worked construction and Mama cleaned houses, both dreaming their daughter would have better opportunities in America. Table 12 needs water refills, and I approach with a pitcher, noting the elderly couple's animated discussion about their recent trip to Tuscany. The woman's Italian is heavily accented, American attempting to sound European, while her husband butchers basic phrases with good-natured enthusiasm. They're sweet, these tourists trying to connect with the culture they're visiting, and I smile as I pour their water. La vista dalla torre di Pisa era incredibile, the woman says to her husband, her grammar slightly off. Ma il cibo qui a New York è anche molto buono. I can't help myself. Avete visitato anche Firenze durante il vostro viaggio? I ask, my voice carrying the perfect Tuscan accent Nonna spent years teaching me. È una città meravigliosa per le gallerie d'arte. Their faces light up with surprise and delight. The husband immediately launches into enthusiastic but clumsy Italian about their visit to the Uffizi Gallery, while his wife peppers me with questions about my family's origins. I explain that my grandparents emigrated from a small village outside Florence, that I grew up hearing stories of olive groves and medieval towers, that Italian was my first language before I learned English in school. For a few minutes, I'm not just a waitress anymore. I'm a bridge between their tourist experience and authentic culture, sharing stories of family recipes and traditions while they tell me about their children and grandchildren back in Ohio. The conversation flows naturally, filled with warmth and genuine connection that makes me temporarily forget the ache in my feet and the stack of legal briefs waiting at home. I'm so engaged in describing my nonna's secret for perfect tiramisu that I don't notice the man at table 7 has stopped eating entirely. His fork hovers forgotten over his ossobuco, while his dark eyes track my every movement, analyzing the way my hands gesture expressively as I speak, the natural confidence that emerges when I'm speaking my native language. Something in his intense stare makes the hair on my arms rise, though I can't yet pinpoint why. When I finally excuse myself from the elderly couple to continue my rounds, I catch a fragment of conversation from table 7. A low, commanding voice speaks to someone across from him. Liam, I want her. The words are quiet, but carry an undertone of absolute certainty, as if he's not expressing a desire, but stating a fact that will inevitably come to pass. I glance quickly toward the voice, and immediately wish I hadn't. The man watching me is devastatingly handsome, in a dangerous way that makes my breath catch. Perfectly styled dark hair, a jaw that could cut glass, and those penetrating eyes that seem to see straight through to my soul. His expensive suit probably costs more than I make in 6 months, and everything about him radiates power and control. When our eyes meet for a split second, I feel like prey that's just been spotted by a predator. Heat floods my cheeks as I hurry toward the kitchen, trying to shake off the unsettling encounter. Rich men sometimes notice the help, but something about his attention feels different, more intense and purposeful than the usual wandering eyes of bored husbands. There was calculation in his gaze, as if he was already planning something I wouldn't like. In the kitchen, I lean against the steel prep counter, trying to calm my racing heart. The familiar chaos of the kitchen provides temporary refuge, servers calling out orders, line cooks shouting in Spanish and Italian, the constant clatter of dishes being washed. It's a world I understand, where hard work matters more than appearance or connections. Luna, table 4 wants to speak with the manager, calls Jessica, another server whose shift started after mine. She's young, newer to the job, and still intimidated by demanding customers. They're complaining about their wine being corked. I nod and grab the wine key from my apron. I'll handle it. Which bottle? The rest of my shift passes in a blur of routine tasks, but I can feel eyes on me throughout the evening. Every time I venture back into the dining room, I'm hyper-aware of table 7, though I avoid looking directly at it. The man's presence seems to fill the entire restaurant, an invisible weight that makes every other patron seem smaller and less significant by comparison. When I finally clock out at midnight, my head is pounding from the combination of a long shift and nervous tension. I change out of my uniform in the cramped employee bathroom, pulling on jeans and a sweater before shouldering my heavy backpack. The walk to the subway station takes me past the restaurant's front windows, and I can't help but glance inside. Table 7 is empty now, but somehow I know this isn't the end of whatever began tonight. As I descend into the subway tunnel, I tell myself I'm being paranoid, that wealthy men forget about waitresses the moment they leave the restaurant. But the feeling of being watched lingers, following me all the way home to my tiny studio apartment, where I'll spend the next 3 hours studying contracts and civil procedure. I unlock my door and step into the familiar safety of my small space. Law books are stacked on every available surface, evidence of my determination to build a better life through education and hard work. Pulling out my laptop, I try to focus on my studies, but my mind keeps drifting back to dark eyes and that commanding voice saying, "I want her," with such quiet certainty. The next morning brings my constitutional law class, where I sit in the back row taking detailed notes while Professor Williams discusses the balance between federal and state power. The lecture material should have my full attention, but I keep thinking about the man from the restaurant. Something about him suggested he was accustomed to getting exactly what he wanted, regardless of laws or conventional boundaries. During my lunch break, I call my parents from a quiet corner of the law library. Mama's voice is tired but warm as she tells me about Papa's job at the construction site and her new cleaning contracts. They're proud of my progress in law school, though they worry about me working so many hours to pay for it. I don't mention last night's strange encounter. There's no point in worrying them over what was probably nothing. The afternoon brings torts class, where we discuss cases involving intentional infliction of emotional distress. The professor presents hypothetical scenarios of power imbalances and psychological manipulation, legal concepts that suddenly feel less abstract than they did yesterday. When class ends, I realize I've been unconsciously gripping my pen so tightly that my knuckles have turned white. Evening brings me back to Bella Notte for another shift. I tie my apron and check my appearance in the mirror, ensuring my hair is neatly pulled back and my smile looks natural rather than forced. The dining room is already bustling with the dinner crowd when I emerge from the back, but my eyes immediately scan table 7. It's occupied by a different party tonight, a family celebrating someone's birthday with expensive champagne and animated conversation. Relief floods through me as I realize I was worrying over nothing. Whatever interest that man had shown was probably just momentary boredom, forgotten as soon as he left the restaurant. I'm assigned to the north section tonight, farthest from table 7, which suits me perfectly. My tables are filled with regular customers and new faces, all demanding the kind of attentive service that keeps my mind occupied and my tips decent. An anniversary couple wants wine recommendations. A business dinner requires careful timing of courses, and a table of college students like myself celebrates someone's acceptance to graduate school. It's while I'm taking the graduate school celebration's dessert order that I notice him. Not at table 7 this time, but at table 3 in my section. The same dark-haired man from last night, now seated alone with a barely touched plate of linguine alle vongole and a glass of red wine. He's reading what appears to be a business document, occasionally making notes with an expensive pen. But I can feel his attention shift to me the moment I appear in his line of sight. My hands begin to tremble slightly as I approach the college student's table, but I force myself to maintain professional composure. He's just another customer, I tell myself. Rich men eat at expensive restaurants. There's nothing inherently threatening about his presence. But when I finally work up the courage to approach his table with a water pitcher, his smile is knowing in a way that makes my stomach clench with unease. "Good evening," I say, keeping my voice steady and professional. "Can I get you anything else tonight?" "Actually," he says, setting down his pen and giving me his full attention, "I was hoping to compliment you on your Italian last night. You have a beautiful accent." The words should be flattering, but something in his tone makes them feel more like a statement of possession than appreciation. "Thank you, sir. My family is from Tuscany." I could tell. Very authentic. He pauses, studying my face with unnerving intensity. "I'm Lucas Santoro. I own several restaurants in the city, including this one." The words hit me like ice water. He owns Bella Notte. My employer, the man who signs my paychecks, the person who could end my job with a single word. The power dynamic shifts so dramatically that I feel dizzy. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Santoro," I manage to say, though my voice sounds strange to my own ears. "Please, call me Lucas." His smile never wavers, but there's steel underneath it. "I'd like to discuss a proposition with you. When does your shift end tonight?" The question hangs in the air between us like a challenge I'm not equipped to handle. My shift ends in 2 hours, but telling him that feels like stepping into a trap I can't see the edges of. Everything about Lucas Santoro radiates controlled power, from his perfectly pressed shirt to the way he holds himself with absolute confidence. He's not asking when my shift ends. He's informing me that we'll be having a conversation whether I want one or not. "I finish at midnight," I hear myself say, the words coming out steadier than I feel. "But I have classes early tomorrow morning." "This won't take long." He slides a business card across the table with 2 fingers, the motion casual but somehow final. "There's a cafe called Dolce Vita, 2 blocks north of here. Meet me there at 12:30. I want to refuse, to tell him I have studying to do, and rent to pay, and a life that doesn't include mysterious meetings with restaurant owners who look at me like I'm something to be acquired. But he owns this place. He controls my income, my ability to pay for law school, my entire carefully constructed plan for building a better future. The weight of that reality settles on my shoulders like a lead blanket. "Of course, Mr. Santoro," I say, slipping the card into my apron pocket without looking at it. "I'll see you then." The rest of my shift passes in a haze of mechanical movements and forced smiles. I take orders, serve food, clear tables, all while hyper-aware of Lucas's presence at table 3. He stays for another hour, occasionally glancing up from his documents to watch me work. When he finally leaves, he doesn't look back, but somehow his absence feels more ominous than his presence did. Jessica notices my distraction when I nearly drop a tray of dirty dishes. "You okay?" "Luna, you seem rattled." "Just tired," I lie, forcing a smile. "Long week. But it's more than fatigue. There's a growing sense that my carefully ordered world is about to be turned upside down by forces beyond my control. The way Lucas looked at me wasn't casual interest or even simple attraction. It was ownership, as if he'd already decided something about my future that I hadn't been consulted on. At midnight, I change out of my uniform with shaking hands. The walk to Dolce Vita feels like a death march, each step taking me further from the safety of routine and closer to whatever Lucas Santoro wants from me. The cafe is small and intimate, filled with the kind of wealthy clientele who don't worry about the price of artisanal coffee and imported pastries. Lucas is already there when I arrive, seated at a corner table with 2 espressos waiting. He's changed from his dinner attire into dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasizes his broad shoulders and lean frame. Without the formal barrier of his business suit, he looks younger, but somehow more dangerous, like a predator who's dropped his civilized mask. "Thank you for coming," he says, as I slide into the chair across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "You're my employer," I reply carefully. "When you ask for a meeting, I assume it's work-related." His laugh is low and rich, genuinely amused. "In a way, it is. I have a proposition for you, Luna, something that could change your life significantly." I wrap my hands around the warm espresso cup, using the heat to steady my nerves. "What kind of proposition?" "I need someone with your particular skills. Fluent Italian, educated, poised, beautiful. Someone who can move in certain social circles and represent my interests professionally." He leans forward slightly, his dark eyes intense. "I'm offering you a position as my personal assistant. The salary would be triple what you make waitressing, plus benefits, plus opportunities to use your legal training once you graduate." The offer is so unexpected that I nearly choke on my coffee. Triple my current salary would mean no more financial stress, no more choosing between textbooks and groceries, no more falling asleep over case studies because I'm too exhausted from work to concentrate properly. "Why me?" I ask suspiciously. "You could hire anyone with those qualifications, someone with actual experience." "Experience can be taught. What you have is natural. Last night, watching you with those tourists, you were completely authentic. That kind of genuine connection can't be faked." His fingers drum once against the table, a small gesture that somehow feels significant. "Plus, your legal background would be valuable. I have various business interests that require careful navigation of regulations and contracts." Something in the way he says business interests makes my skin prickle. I think about the expensive suit, the way other restaurant staff deferred to him without question, the quiet authority he radiates even in casual clothes. Rich men don't usually take such personal interest in their waitresses unless there's more to the story. "What exactly would my duties include?" I ask, stalling for time while my mind races through possibilities. "Administrative work mostly. Scheduling, correspondence, accompanying me to business dinners and social events. You'd need to be available during evening hours frequently, which I know conflicts with your current class schedule." He pauses, watching my reaction carefully. "I've already spoken to Dean Morrison at your law school. If you accept this position, you'll be transferred to the evening program with full scholarship coverage." The words hit me like a physical blow. He's already contacted my school, already arranged for my schedule to be changed, already made decisions about my life without consulting me. The presumption is breathtaking and terrifying. "You spoke to my dean?" My voice comes out sharper than intended. "You had no right to do that." I had every right to explore options that would benefit both of us. The evening program is actually more prestigious, designed for working professionals. Your professors would include practicing attorneys and federal judges. The connections alone would be worth more than your current tuition costs. He's right, and that's what makes this so insidious. The evening program is harder to get into, more expensive, and absolutely would open doors that my current track won't. But the fact that he's already manipulated the situation without my knowledge makes every instinct I have scream warnings. "I need time to think about this," I say, starting to stand. "Of course." But his hand moves across the table to rest lightly on my wrist, not grabbing but clearly indicating I should sit back down. "But I should mention that Bellinata will be closing for renovations next month. All current staff will be laid off, though I'll be happy to provide excellent references. The threat is delivered so smoothly, wrapped in such reasonable language, that it takes me a moment to process what he's actually saying. Accept his offer or lose my job. Take his deal or watch my carefully planned future crumble. That's quite a coincidence, I manage to say, though my throat feels tight. Not a coincidence at all. I've been planning these renovations for months, but the timing works out well for everyone involved. His thumb brushes once across my wrist, a touch so brief it might have been accidental if not for the calculating look in his eyes. You're obviously intelligent, Luna. I'm sure you can see the advantages of this arrangement. I can see them clearly, which is what makes this so terrifying. Financial security, educational opportunities, professional advancement, everything I've been working toward, handed to me on a silver platter by a man who looks at me like I'm something he's decided to collect. What happens if I accept and then change my mind later? I ask, though I suspect I already know the answer. Why would you want to change your mind? You'd be working in a professional environment, using your education, building connections that will serve you throughout your legal career. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. Of course, the position would require absolute discretion. Client confidentiality, you understand. Very important in my line of work. The way he emphasizes discretion and confidentiality makes it clear that backing out wouldn't be a simple matter of submitting 2 weeks' notice. Once I'm inside his world, I'd know things that would make leaving complicated, possibly dangerous. I really do need time to think about this, I say again, more firmly this time. Lucas studies my face for a long moment, then nods slowly. 24 hours. The renovations begin Monday, so I'll need your decision by tomorrow night. He slides another card across the table, this one with a phone number written in elegant script. Call me when you've decided. I take the card with numb fingers, noting how his handwriting somehow manages to look both sophisticated and predatory. As I stand to leave, he doesn't try to stop me this time, but his voice follows me to the door. Luna, I turn back reluctantly. You're remarkably beautiful when you speak Italian. I look forward to hearing more of it. The walk home feels surreal, like I'm moving through someone else's life. My tiny studio apartment, with its stack of law books and secondhand furniture, suddenly looks shabby and inadequate. But it's mine, earned through my own work and determination. Taking Lucas's offer would mean giving up that independence for security that comes with strings attached. I spend the night staring at the ceiling, weighing options that all seem rigged against me. By morning, I've made my decision, though I'm not sure it's the right one. The next evening, I'm back at Bellinade for what might be my last shift as an ordinary waitress. The dining room buzzes with its usual sophisticated energy, but I feel like I'm watching it all through glass, already separate from this world I'm about to leave behind. Lucas arrives at 9, taking his usual table and ordering his usual meal. But tonight feels different, charged with anticipation and unspoken agreements. When I finally approach his table near the end of my shift, he looks up expectantly. I'll take the position, I say quietly, the words feeling like both salvation and surrender. His smile is triumphant, predatory, satisfied. Excellent choice. Report to this address tomorrow at 10. He hands me yet another card, this one with an uptown address embossed in gold. Wear something professional but not too conservative. You'll be meeting some important clients. As I walk away from his table for the last time as his employee rather than his waitress, I catch my reflection in the restaurant's mirrors. I look the same as always, but I feel fundamentally changed, as if I've crossed an invisible line that I'll never be able to uncross. Tomorrow, I'll enter Lucas Santoro's world properly. Tonight, I mourn the loss of my simple, honest life and pray that I haven't just made the biggest mistake of my existence. The address Lucas gave me leads to a gleaming office building in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place where men in $1,000 suits make decisions that affect millions of lives. The lobby is all marble and brass, with security guards who look more like military personnel than typical building staff. When I give them my name, they're expecting me, which somehow makes everything feel more real and more terrifying. The elevator rises to the 32nd floor in silence, giving me time to second-guess every decision that led me here. I've dressed carefully in a black pencil skirt and white blouse, professional enough to fit in, but not so formal that I look like I'm trying too hard. My hands shake slightly as I check my appearance in the polished steel doors. Lucas's office suite takes up half the floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city. The reception area is elegant but understated, staffed by a woman in her 50s, who looks like she could run a small country if necessary. She introduces herself as Margaret and explains that she'll be training me on the administrative systems. Mr. Santoro is in meetings all morning, she tells me, her voice crisp and efficient. But he wants to see you at noon for lunch with a client. Something about your Italian being useful for the conversation. The morning passes in a blur of password setups, filing systems, and protocol explanations. Margaret is professional but not unfriendly, treating me like a competent adult rather than a wayward waitress who stumbled into a world above her station. The work itself seems straightforward: scheduling, correspondence, research, though I notice certain files are marked with color-coded systems that Margaret doesn't explain. At 11:30, she shows me to a smaller office adjacent to Lucas's main workspace. "This will be yours," she says, gesturing to a desk that's nicer than any furniture I've ever owned. Mr. Santoro likes his assistants to be nearby but not underfoot. Through the connecting door, I can see into Lucas's office. It's masculine and sophisticated, with dark wood furniture and artwork that probably costs more than most people's cars. A wet bar occupies one corner, and I notice multiple phones on his desk, including what looks like a secure line. At exactly noon, Lucas emerges from his office dressed in a navy suit that emphasizes his commanding presence. He looks me over approvingly, his gaze lingering in a way that makes me conscious of every inch of my body. "Perfect," he says, though I'm not sure if he means my appearance or something else entirely. "Ready for your first assignment?" The restaurant he takes me to is even more exclusive than Bella Nata, the kind of place that doesn't advertise because its clientele finds it through word of mouth and family connections. We're seated at a private table where Lucas introduces me to Salvatore Benedetti, an elderly man with keen eyes and an air of old-world authority. "Salvatore, this is Luna, my new assistant." Luna, Mr. Benedetti is an old family friend visiting from Palermo. The conversation that follows is conducted entirely in Italian, and I quickly realize this isn't a typical business lunch. Salvatore speaks in the rapid, idiomatic Sicilian dialect that's different from my family's Tuscan Italian, but I can follow most of it. They discuss shipping schedules, customs procedures, and payment transfers in language that's technically legal, but carries undertones of something else entirely. Lucas watches me carefully throughout the meal, gauging my reactions to certain topics. When Salvatore mentions La Familia and Rispetto, I keep my expression neutral, despite understanding exactly what kind of family business they're discussing. This isn't about restaurants or legitimate imports. This is about the other kind of Italian tradition, the one that operates in shadows and settles disputes without lawyers or courts. "Your assistant has excellent comprehension," Salvatore tells Lucas in Italian, clearly testing whether I understand. "And beautiful discretion. These are valuable qualities." "She's exceeded my expectations already," Lucas replies, his hand moving to rest possessively on my lower back. "I think she'll be very useful for our expanding operations." The touch is brief, but unmistakable in its intent. I'm not just his employee, I'm his property, displayed for approval by his associates. The realization makes my skin crawl, but I maintain my professional smile and continue taking notes on shipping schedules that probably have nothing to do with legal cargo. After lunch, Lucas drives me back to the office in a car that costs more than my parents' house. The leather interior smells expensive, and classical music plays softly from hidden speakers. For several blocks, he doesn't speak, seemingly content to let me process what I've just witnessed. "You handled that well," he finally says, his voice approving. "Salvatore was impressed with your language skills and your discretion." "What exactly am I being discreet about?" I ask, though I'm not sure I want the answer. "Salvatore imports specialty foods from Sicily. Olive oil, wine, cured meats. Very traditional methods. Family recipes passed down through generations." His explanation is technically true, but obviously incomplete. "Some of the regulatory requirements can be complicated. Having someone who speaks the language fluently makes communication much smoother." I nod as if this explanation satisfies me, though we both know it doesn't. The afternoon brings more administrative tasks, but now I'm hyper-aware of every phone call Lucas takes behind his closed door, every visitor who arrives without appointments, every document marked with those color-coded systems Margaret wouldn't explain. By evening, my head is spinning with the implications of what I've gotten myself into. Lucas Santoro isn't just a successful restaurant owner. He's connected to something larger and darker, something that requires the kind of discretion that keeps people quiet permanently. As I prepare to leave for the day, Lucas appears at my office door. "Dinner tomorrow night. Charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum. You'll need something formal. I've arranged for a personal shopper to meet you in the morning." Is this work? Or... I trail off, not sure how to categorize what our relationship is becoming. Everything is work now, Luna, but some work is more pleasant than others. His smile is warm but predatory. 8 o'clock. Car will pick you up at 7:30. That night, I lie awake wondering what I've traded my simple life for. Financial security, yes, but at what cost? I'm no longer a struggling law student working her way through school. I'm something else now, something that belongs to Lucas Santoro and his world of expensive suits and unspoken threats. The personal shopper arrives at my apartment with a selection of evening gowns that probably cost more than I used to make in 6 months. I choose a midnight blue dress that's elegant without being ostentatious, paired with jewelry that feels foreign against my skin. When I look in the mirror, I see someone I don't recognize. Polished, sophisticated, expensive. The charity gala is a display of New York's elite, filled with politicians, business leaders, and old money families who've been attending these events for generations. Lucas moves through the crowd like he belongs, which I'm beginning to understand he does. The Santoro name opens doors that money alone can't touch. "Stay close," he murmurs as we enter the main reception hall. "There are people here who know about you now. Your safety depends on being seen as mine." The possessiveness in his voice should anger me, but instead it sends an unwelcome thrill down my spine. When he places his hand on my waist to guide me through the crowd, I don't pull away. When he introduces me as his associate to powerful people whose names I recognize from newspaper headlines, I smile and make appropriate conversation in whatever language the situation requires. It's during the silent auction that I first notice we're being watched. A man across the room keeps glancing in our direction, his attention focused not on Lucas, but on me. When I mention this to Lucas, his expression darkens with something dangerous. "Viktor Kozlov," he says quietly. "Russian. He's been trying to expand his operations into territory that's been in my family for 3 generations. What does he want with me? Information, leverage, or maybe he just wants to see what's important to me so he knows what to target." Lucas's hand tightens slightly on my waist. "Stay in my sight for the rest of the evening." But as the night progresses, I begin to understand that my presence here isn't just about displaying Lucas's latest acquisition. I'm being introduced to people who matter, building relationships that will serve purposes I don't fully understand yet. By the time we leave, I've exchanged business cards with a federal judge, 2 senators, and the mayor's chief of staff. "You're a natural at this," Lucas tells me in the car afterward, "born for this life." Maybe I am, which is what terrifies me most. The transition from struggling waitress to whatever I'm becoming feels too smooth, too inevitable. Like I was always meant to end up here, in the passenger seat of an expensive car, wearing jewelry that costs more than my parents' annual income, belonging to a man whose business requires the kind of discretion that people kill to maintain. When we arrive at my apartment building, Lucas walks me to the door like a proper gentleman. But when he kisses me goodnight, there's nothing proper about it. His lips are demanding, possessive, claiming me in a way that leaves no doubt about his intentions. "Tomorrow we'll discuss your new living arrangements," he says against my mouth. "This neighborhood isn't safe enough anymore." I want to argue, to insist that I can take care of myself, but the words die in my throat. Because deep down, I know he's right. I'm no longer Luna Rossi, law student and waitress. I'm Lucas Santoro's woman, which makes me a target for anyone who wants to hurt him. As I watch his car disappear into the night, I realize there's no going back to my old life. Whatever I've become, whatever I'm becoming, this is my reality now. Tomorrow I'll move into whatever cage he's prepared for me, and I'll tell myself it's for my own protection. The transformation is complete. I just hope I survive it. The penthouse Lucas moves me into overlook Central Park and feels more like a museum than a home. Everything is pristine, expensive, and completely foreign to someone who grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. The view is spectacular, but the windows don't open, and I can't help feeling like I'm living in a beautiful prison cell. Margaret helps me settle in, explaining security protocols with the same efficiency she uses for everything else. Key cards for the elevator, security codes for the apartment, a panic button disguised as elegant jewelry. "Mr. Santoro takes your safety very seriously," she tells me, though her tone suggests this level of protection isn't entirely optional. My law school transfer to the evening program happens seamlessly, just as Lucas promised. My new professors are intimidating in their expertise, practicing attorneys who treat legal theory as a living, breathing thing rather than abstract concepts. The scholarship covers everything: tuition, books, even a laptop that's significantly more advanced than my old one. But success comes with strings attached that become clearer each day. Lucas expects me at business dinners 3 nights a week, social events every weekend, and morning briefings on his calendar and correspondence. My Italian skills are essential for his meetings with certain clients, though I'm learning to recognize when conversations shift from legitimate business to something else entirely. The work itself is more complex than I initially understood. Lucas's empire includes restaurants, yes, but also construction companies, shipping firms, and real estate holdings that seem to operate according to rules I wasn't taught in business law class. When I research certain contracts, I notice discrepancies between reported income and actual cash flow that would make any accounting professor suspicious. "Don't look too closely at the numbers," Margaret advises when she notices me struggling with financial reports. Mr. Santoro values loyalty over curiosity. The warning is delivered kindly but firmly, and I understand that my legal education is both an asset and a liability in this environment. I know enough to recognize potential illegalities, but not enough to understand the full scope of what I'm protecting through my discretion. 3 weeks into my new life, I'm accompanying Lucas to a business dinner in Little Italy, when everything changes. The restaurant is small, family-owned, filled with the kind of authentic atmosphere that can't be manufactured. We're seated with several other men whose expensive suits can't disguise their working-class roots, and the conversation flows between English and Italian, depending on the sensitivity of the topic. I'm taking notes on what appears to be a legitimate real estate deal when the front door explodes inward. 4 men in dark clothing burst in, guns drawn, shouting in Russian-accented English. The few civilian diners scream and dive under tables while the men at our table reach for weapons I hadn't noticed them carrying. Time slows to a crawl as chaos erupts around us. Lucas shoves me behind an overturned table while gunfire erupts across the small dining room. The smell of gunpowder mixes with garlic and wine, creating a sensory contradiction that my brain struggles to process. "Stay down," Lucas hisses, his own gun appearing in his hand with practiced ease. Don't move until I tell you. But one of the attackers spots me behind the table and starts advancing, his weapon trained on my head. He's young, maybe 25, with the lean build of someone who grew up fighting for survival. As he gets closer, I notice something familiar about his face, something that triggers a memory from my neighborhood back in Queens. Dmitri? I call out in Russian, using language skills I learned from a college roommate. Dmitri Volkov from 47th Street. The man stops, confusion replacing aggression on his face. Luna? Luna Rossi? What the hell are you doing here? Recognition floods through me. Dmitri lived 3 blocks from my family when we were teenagers. We attended the same high school, though he was 2 years older and ran with a crowd my parents warned me to avoid. I remember him as smart, but angry, someone who felt the world owed him more than he was getting. I work here, I say carefully, slowly rising from behind the table with my hands visible. But more importantly, why are you pointing a gun at innocent people? Innocent? He laughs bitterly. You know who you're working for, Luna? You know what these men do? Around us, the standoff continues. Lucas's men have taken defensive positions, but they're outnumbered and caught in an unfavorable tactical situation. I can see in Lucas's eyes that he's calculating odds and not liking the results. I know enough, I reply honestly. But I also know that shooting up a restaurant full of families isn't going to solve whatever problem you think you have. The problem is Santoro moving product through our territory without paying tribute, Dmitri spits. The problem is your boyfriend thinking he owns this whole city. He's not my boyfriend, I say automatically, then realize how irrelevant that distinction is in the current circumstances. But maybe we can work something out, talk instead of shoot. I glance at Lucas, who's watching this exchange with a mixture of concern and calculation. A slight nod from him gives me permission to continue, though I suspect he's also positioning himself to end this conversation permanently if necessary. Tell me what you want, I say to Dmitri in Russian, switching languages to exclude the others from our conversation. What would it take for everyone to walk out of here alive? The negotiation that follows is unlike anything they taught us in mediation class. Dmitri wants territory concessions and a percentage of certain operations. Lucas wants to maintain his existing arrangements while eliminating future threats. I find myself translating not just languages, but world views, looking for common ground between 2 men who've been raised to see conflict as a zero-sum game. My law school training helps more than I expected. Contract principles apply even to illegal agreements, and both sides need something they can live with literally. After 20 minutes of careful conversation, we reach a tentative understanding. Territory boundaries will be redrawn, percentages adjusted, and future disputes resolved through discussion rather than gunfire. You speak good Russian, Dmitri tells me as his men slowly lower their weapons. And you think like a lawyer. That's useful in this business. I am a lawyer, I correct him. Almost. Even better. He holsters his gun but doesn't relax entirely. Tell Santoro this arrangement only works if he honors it. We're not going anywhere. After the Russians leave, the restaurant erupts in rapid Italian as everyone processes what just happened. Lucas pulls me aside, his hands checking me for injuries while his eyes search my face for signs of trauma. Are you hurt? He demands. Did they threaten you? I'm fine, I assure him, though my hands are shaking now that the adrenaline is wearing off. I just recognized Dmitri from the neighborhood. You negotiated a territorial agreement in 2 languages while under threat of death, Lucas says, his voice carrying a note of amazement. That's not fine, Luna. That's extraordinary. The drive back to the penthouse is quiet, both of us processing the evening's events. When we arrive, Lucas pours himself a drink, with hands that aren't entirely steady. The controlled facade he maintains is cracking slightly, revealing the stress he hides behind his confident exterior. I should have anticipated this, he says, more to himself than to me. Victor's been pushing the Russians to test our boundaries. I put you in danger. I chose to be there, I remind him, and I chose to speak up when I recognized Dmitri. You probably saved lives tonight, including mine. He turns to face me, his expression intense. But it also means you're no longer just my assistant. You're part of this now, fully and completely. I understand what he's saying. Tonight changed everything. I'm not an innocent bystander who happened to witness illegal activity. I'm an active participant who helped negotiate a criminal agreement. There's no going back to being a simple law student who doesn't know what her employer really does. What happens now? I ask, though I suspect I already know. Now you learn the rest of it. All of it. Lucas moves closer, his presence both protective and possessive. Because after tonight, Victor knows you're valuable to me. That makes you a target until this territorial dispute is resolved permanently. The implications settle over me like a heavy blanket. My transformation from waitress to assistant was just the beginning. Now I'm becoming something else entirely. A partner, a liability, a weapon, a target. All depending on circumstances I can't control. I need to call my parents, I say suddenly. Make sure they're safe. Lucas nods approvingly. Already done. They're being moved to a secure location until we can assess the threat level. Consider it a vacation. All expenses paid. The casual mention of my family's relocation without my consultation should anger me, but instead, I feel grateful. Lucas is thinking steps ahead, protecting people I care about before I even realize they might be in danger. Thank you, I say, meaning it despite the circumstances. You're mine now, Luna. Completely mine. That means everything you care about is under my protection. His fingers trace the line of my jaw with surprising gentleness. But it also means you'll never be safe from people who want to hurt me. The choice has been made for me. Or perhaps I made it myself the moment I recognized Dmitri and chose to speak instead of staying hidden. Either way, there's no path back to my old life. I'm Luna Santoro now in everything but name, and that name change is probably just a matter of time. As I prepare for bed in the guest room of this beautiful prison, I catch sight of myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me is polished, confident, dangerous in ways I'm still discovering. She's nothing like the scared waitress who agreed to Lucas's proposition 4 weeks ago. I just hope she's strong enough to survive what comes next. The wedding planning begins 6 months later, though it feels less like preparing for a celebration and more like orchestrating a political alliance. Every detail is scrutinized for security implications. Guest lists are vetted through multiple intelligence sources, and the venue requires enough fortification to repel a small army. I never officially accepted Lucas's proposal because he never officially made one. The ring simply appeared on my finger one morning after a particularly successful negotiation with a union leader who'd been causing problems for one of Lucas's construction projects. My legal training had proved invaluable in finding loopholes that avoided violence while achieving our objectives. "You're wearing my ring," Lucas had observed over breakfast, as if commenting on the weather. "It seems I am," I'd replied, studying the flawless diamond that probably cost more than most people's houses. "Good. We'll announce the engagement at the Benedetti anniversary party next month." And that was that. No romantic speeches, no getting down on one knee, just the inevitable progression of a relationship that had stopped being optional a long time ago. I should have been offended by the lack of romance, but by then I understood that Lucas expressed love through protection, possession, and the gradual elimination of any life that didn't include him. The law school graduation ceremony happens 3 weeks before the wedding. Lucas attends despite the security concerns, sitting in the family section with an intensity that makes other parents uncomfortable. When my name is called and I walk across that stage to receive my diploma, I see pride in his eyes that's almost painful in its sincerity. Dr. Luna Rossi, he says when I reach him afterward, emphasis on the new title. How does it feel? Surreal, I admit, clutching the diploma that represents 4 years of work that feels like someone else's life. Everything feels surreal lately. That evening, he presents me with a briefcase containing contracts for 3 legitimate legal positions: corporate counsel for his restaurant group, legal advisor for his real estate holdings, and consulting attorney for his various business interests. All lucrative, all respectable, all ways to use my education within the framework of his empire. Choose whichever interests you most, he tells me. Or all 3, if you prefer. Your law license gives us options we didn't have before. I select the corporate counsel position, partly because restaurants feel like familiar territory, and partly because I suspect it's the cleanest of his operations. The work is challenging, and legitimately legal, though I'm careful not to look too closely at certain financial arrangements that seem designed to obscure rather than clarify. Margaret retires 2 weeks before the wedding. Her replacement, a younger woman named Sophia, who speaks 4 languages and has experience with what she delicately terms complex security requirements. The transition is smooth, but I miss Margaret's maternal presence. She'd been a buffer between me and the darker aspects of Lucas's world, protecting my innocence for as long as possible. The bachelor party is held at a private club that I pretend not to know is owned by the Benedetti family. Lucas returns home that night sober and uninjured, which I've learned to count as a victory. Too many of his associates have enemies who might see such events as opportunities. My bachelorette party, by contrast, is a carefully orchestrated affair at the penthouse. The guest list includes wives and daughters of Lucas's business associates, women who understand exactly what kind of life I'm entering. They're uniformly elegant, perfectly composed, and absolutely terrifying in their loyalty to their husband's interests. Marriage in this life isn't like civilian marriage, explains Carla Benedetti, Salvatore's daughter-in-law. Your husband's enemies become your enemies. His successes become your successes. His secrets become your secrets, buried so deep you forget they ever existed. The other women nod in agreement, offering advice that's part etiquette lesson and part survival guide. How to host dinner parties that serve dual purposes as business meetings. How to socialize with law enforcement while maintaining appropriate boundaries. How to raise children who understand the importance of discretion without feeling burdened by family legacy. You're lucky, adds Maria Santos, whose husband controls the docks on the west side. Lucas chose you for love as much as utility. That's rare in arranged marriages. I realize with a start that most of these women didn't choose their husbands any more than I chose Lucas. The difference is that my cage is gilded with genuine affection, while theirs are maintained through duty and fear. The wedding ceremony takes place at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a choice that required months of negotiations with church officials and enough security to protect a head of state. The guest list reads like a who's who of New York's power structure, with federal judges sitting next to men whose business cards list only phone numbers. I walk down the aisle in a dress that cost more than my parents' house, toward a man who looks devastating in his custom tuxedo. When our eyes meet, I see possession and pride, and something that might be love if it weren't so consuming. He doesn't smile during the ceremony, but his hands are steady when he places the wedding ring on my finger. The reception is held at the Plaza Hotel, transformed into a fortress of elegance and security. Every waiter has been background checked, every vendor vetted through multiple sources, every guest screened for weapons and recording devices. The food is exceptional, the music perfect, the atmosphere exactly what one would expect from a society wedding. But underneath the civilized veneer, I can feel the currents of power and obligation that bind these people together. During our first dance, Lucas whispers in my ear, "You're officially untouchable now. Mrs. Santoro carries weight that Luna Rossi never could." The name change is more than ceremonial. Within a week of returning from our honeymoon in Tuscany, I'm fielding calls from attorneys, judges, and politicians who want to discuss cases and legislation with someone who has Lucas's ear. My law degree becomes a bridge between his world and legitimate power structures, allowing conversations that couldn't happen directly. The honeymoon itself was surreal. 2 weeks in a restored villa outside Florence, surrounded by vineyards and olive groves that belonged to Lucas's extended family. For brief moments, walking through villages where my grandmother grew up, I could almost pretend we were a normal couple enjoying our new marriage. But even in rural Italy, security personnel shadowed our movements, and Lucas took calls at all hours in rapid Italian that had nothing to do with tourism. "This is where it all began," he told me one evening as we watched sunset paint the Tuscan hills gold. "My great-grandfather left this place with nothing but determination and a willingness to do whatever was necessary to survive. And now we own half of it." His smile was satisfied, but not entirely happy. "Success comes with obligations, Luna. Every generation builds on what came before, adding their own piece to the legacy." I understood then that I wasn't just marrying Lucas. I was marrying into a dynasty with roots stretching back over a century. My children would inherit not just wealth, but expectations, responsibilities, and enemies I couldn't even imagine yet. The first real test of my new position comes 3 months after the wedding. Viktor Kozlov, the Russian who'd been watching me at the charity gala, requests a meeting to discuss what he terms mutual interests. The request comes through proper channels, with enough formality to suggest legitimate business. But Lucas's reaction tells me there's more to it. "He wants to see how much influence you actually have," Lucas explains as we prepare for the meeting. "Whether you're just decorative or actually involved in decision-making. And which am I?" His smile is predatory. "That depends on how well you handle this conversation." The meeting takes place at a neutral location, a private dining room at the Four Seasons that's been swept for surveillance devices and staffed with our own security. Victor arrives with 2 associates, all of them impeccably dressed and radiating the kind of cold professionalism that suggests military backgrounds. "Mrs. Santoro," Victor greets me with European formality, kissing my hand in a gesture that manages to be both respectful and vaguely threatening. "Congratulations on your recent marriage. I hear you've become quite influential in certain circles." "I prefer to think of myself as well-connected rather than influential," I reply carefully. "Influence suggests power I'm not sure I possess." "Modest. I appreciate that quality." He settles into his chair with fluid grace. "But modesty aside, you have access to legal channels that could benefit all of us. Immigration issues, licensing problems, regulatory complications. These things slow down business unnecessarily. What follows is a carefully choreographed dance around the edges of legitimate business. Victor wants help navigating legal obstacles that interfere with his operations, while Lucas wants assurance that any assistance won't create future complications. As a licensed attorney married to a powerful man, I represent a unique opportunity to bridge worlds that don't usually communicate directly. I can review certain regulatory matters, I tell Victor after consulting with Lucas through meaningful glances. But only if all activities fall within legal parameters. My bar license is non-negotiable. Of course, we're all legitimate businessmen here. Victor's smile doesn't reach his eyes. Perhaps we could start with some import-export documentation issues. Very routine. Very legal. The agreement we reach is carefully worded and technically legal, but I understand I'm now providing services to people whose definition of legitimate business differs significantly from the American Bar Association's. Over the following months, I review contracts, filing procedures, and regulatory compliance issues for clients who pay in cash and never want to meet in the same location twice. Lucas watches this development with satisfaction and something that might be pride. "You're becoming indispensable," he tells me after a particularly successful consultation. "Not just to me, but to the entire structure we've built. The work is intellectually challenging and financially rewarding, but it also means crossing lines. I swore I'd never cross when I first started law school. Each consultation, each document review, each routine legal service pulls me deeper into a world where legitimate business and criminal enterprise blend so seamlessly that the distinctions become meaningless. My parents visit for Christmas, staying in the guest wing of our new house in Westchester. The property is beautiful. 20 acres of manicured grounds surrounding a mansion that's featured in architectural magazines. But I notice Papa examining the security systems with the eye of someone who understands construction, while Mama asks careful questions about my work that suggest she's not as naive as I once thought. "You look happy," Mama tells me as we prepare Christmas dinner together. Different, but happy. Different how? Confident, powerful, like you know secrets the rest of us don't. She pauses in her stirring to study my face. That can be lonely, cara mia. Power is often lonely. She's right, though I wouldn't have admitted it 6 months ago. The women in my social circle now are pleasant but guarded, our friendships limited by what we can't discuss. My law school classmates have moved on to careers in corporate firms or public service, lives that seem impossibly simple compared to mine. Even casual conversations require careful editing to avoid revealing too much about my actual daily activities. But Lucas provides an anchor in this shifting landscape. Behind closed doors, away from business obligations and social expectations, he's surprisingly tender. He remembers details about my law school professors, asks about my parents' health, and seems genuinely interested in my opinions on everything from restaurant menus to international politics. "Do you ever regret it?" he asks one evening as we're reviewing seating charts for an upcoming dinner party. "The life you gave up for this one?" I consider the question seriously. The old Luna would have been studying for the bar exam in a cramped studio apartment, worried about student loans and entry-level salary negotiations. This Luna reviews million-dollar contracts in a home office overlooking landscaped gardens, with financial security that extends to my parents and future children I haven't even conceived yet. I regret how little choice I had, I answer honestly, but I don't regret where I ended up. His expression grows serious. "You always had choices, Luna. Maybe not good ones, but choices nonetheless. You could have refused my first offer, could have tried to disappear, could have gone to the FBI with what you've learned, and risked everyone I care about getting hurt in the process. Yes, that's the price of living in my world. Everyone you love becomes a potential target." He reaches across the table to cover my hand with his. But also, everyone you love gets protected by resources most people can't imagine. It's a fair trade, I suppose, though one I wish I'd understood more clearly before making it. Safety and security, in exchange for freedom and innocence. Wealth and power balanced against constant vigilance and moral compromise. The dinner party we're planning will host 40 guests, including a federal judge, 2 senators, the mayor, and enough business leaders to move markets with a single coordinated decision. My role is to facilitate conversations, provide legal insight when requested, and ensure that everyone leaves feeling their interests have been heard and respected. "You're becoming a political asset," Lucas observes as we finalize the guest list. "People want access to you specifically, not just tolerance from me." He's right. Over the past year, I've built relationships with legitimate power brokers who see me as a bridge to Lucas's world, without the complications of direct contact. Judges who need insight into organized crime patterns for sentencing decisions. Politicians who want to understand constituency, concerns without appearing to negotiate with criminals. Business leaders who need problems solved through unofficial channels. "Is that what you wanted when you first approached me?" I ask. "A political asset?" "I wanted you," he says simply. "Everything else is just convenient coincidence." The dinner party is a success, with conversations that will influence legislation, judicial decisions, and economic policies for months to come. I move through the evening playing hostess, attorney, and unofficial diplomat, facilitating discussions that couldn't happen in official settings, but that serve everyone's interests. Later, as we're cleaning up, Lucas pulls me aside. There's something we need to discuss. Something important. The seriousness in his tone makes my stomach clench with familiar anxiety. In his world, important discussions usually involve danger, displacement, or decisions that will change everything again. Victor's operation is expanding faster than we anticipated, he begins. The territorial agreements you negotiated are holding, but he's bringing in new people, hungrier people who don't respect the boundaries we established. What does that mean for us? It means we need to consolidate our position, strengthen alliances, eliminate weaknesses, prepare for conflicts that diplomacy might not resolve. His hands settle on my shoulders, warm and reassuring. And it means starting the next phase of our life together. Understanding dawns slowly. You want to have children. I want heirs. Protected heirs who understand their inheritance and responsibilities. His expression grows tender. But more than that, I want a family with you. Children who grow up bilingual and brilliant, who can navigate both worlds without losing themselves in either. The prospect of pregnancy in this environment terrifies and excites me in equal measure. Children would make me more vulnerable but also more valuable, creating bonds that would ensure my permanent place in Lucas's world, while giving me leverage I don't currently possess. When? I ask, though I suspect the timing isn't entirely up to me. Soon. Before the situation with Victor escalates to the point where pregnancy becomes too dangerous. He pauses, studying my face. Are you ready for that level of commitment? As if I haven't already committed everything I am and everything I could become to this life we've built together. But children would seal that commitment in ways that legal contracts and marriage certificates can't touch. Once I'm carrying Lucas Santoro's heir, I'll never be anything other than his wife, his partner, his most valuable asset and greatest vulnerability. Yes, I hear myself say, the word carrying weight I'm still learning to measure. I'm ready. His kiss is possessive and tender, claiming and celebrating simultaneously. When we break apart, I see satisfaction in his eyes mixed with something that might be relief, as if he'd been holding his breath, waiting for my answer to a question that was never really optional. 6 weeks later, I'm staring at a positive pregnancy test in the marble bathroom of our Westchester mansion, wondering how a simple plus sign can feel like both victory and surrender. Outside, snow falls on gardens that will bloom again in spring, marking time that feels both precious and borrowed. Lucas finds me there, still holding the test, still processing the magnitude of what we've set in motion. And? He asks, though my expression probably already gives him the answer. Congratulations, I whisper. You're going to be a father. His reaction is immediate and overwhelming, gathering me into his arms with a gentleness that contrasts sharply with his usual controlled demeanor. For a moment, the dangerous man who commands respect through fear disappears, replaced by someone vulnerable and amazed by the possibility of new life. Our child, he murmurs against my hair. Our legacy. Standing in his embrace, surrounded by luxury that would have been unimaginable in my old life, I realize this is exactly where I was always meant to end up. Not because of fate or destiny, but because every choice I made, accepting his job offer, moving into his world, speaking up during that confrontation with Dimitri, led inevitably to this moment. I'm no longer Luna Rossi, the waitress who spoke Italian to tourists and dreamed of a simple legal career. I'm Luna Santoro, wife to a powerful man, attorney to dangerous clients, and now mother to the next generation of a dynasty that spans continents and influences governments. The transformation is complete, and there's no path back to innocence. But as Lucas's hands settle protectively over my still flat stomach, I realize I don't want one. This life, complicated and dangerous as it is, belongs to me now, and I belong to it, completely and irrevocably. The baby kicks for the first time during a meeting with the federal judge who's become one of my most important contacts. Judge Patricia Hernandez is reviewing sentencing guidelines for organized crime cases, seeking input that will help her understand the difference between leadership and operational roles in criminal enterprises. The challenge, she explains, is determining which defendants are truly dangerous versus those who are simply caught in circumstances beyond their control. I nod thoughtfully, one hand resting on my expanding belly while the other takes notes. Intent matters as much as action. Someone who chooses to participate is different from someone who's coerced or has no viable alternatives. Exactly. But proving intent can be nearly impossible when defendants refuse to cooperate or provide context for their decisions. The conversation continues for another hour, with me providing insight that helps shape how federal courts will handle cases involving people like Lucas, while carefully avoiding any information that could be traced back to specific individuals or operations. It's a delicate balance that requires legal expertise, cultural knowledge, and enough political savvy to serve everyone's interests without betraying anyone's trust. After Judge Hernandez leaves, I remain in my office reviewing contracts for a new restaurant venture. The work is legitimately legal and intellectually satisfying, but I'm constantly aware of how it fits into the larger structure Lucas has built. Every successful business creates cover for operations that require legitimate fronts. Every legal victory protects assets and personnel that might otherwise be vulnerable. Lucas finds me there as evening shadows lengthen across the hardwood floors. How did your meeting go? Productive. Judge Hernandez is developing a more nuanced understanding of criminal hierarchy. It should result in more appropriate sentences for lower-level defendants, which keeps our people quiet instead of desperate. He settles into the chair across from my desk, his expression pleased. You're protecting our organization without compromising your professional ethics. That's a rare skill. He's right, though the ethical boundaries are more blurred than I would have preferred when I first graduated law school. But protecting people from unjust prosecution isn't inherently wrong, even when those people work for criminal enterprises. The law is supposed to be about justice, not just punishment. Dr. Martinez wants to discuss nursery security, Lucas continues, changing the subject to more immediate concerns. Nothing elaborate, just basic monitoring and safe room protocols. Our obstetrician has experience with high-profile patients who require special privacy considerations, though I suspect most of her clientele are celebrities rather than crime family matriarchs. The security measures she's suggesting are reasonable, but remind me constantly that our child will inherit dangers along with privileges. Have you thought about names? I ask, deflecting from security concerns I'm not ready to fully confront. Something that works in both languages. Traditional enough to honor family, but American enough to avoid unwanted attention. His hand moves to cover mine on my belly. What does your family tradition suggest? The conversation that follows weaves between Italian naming customs, American practicalities, and the subtle meanings embedded in choices that will follow our child throughout their life. Every decision feels weighted with significance that extends far beyond personal preference. That weekend, we drive to Queens to have Sunday dinner with my parents. The contrast between my childhood neighborhood and our current life is stark, but not uncomfortable. Papa's construction work has given him insight into building techniques that makes him appreciate the security features of our new home, while Mama's years of cleaning houses taught her to recognize quality in everything from furniture to table settings. You look healthy, Mama observes as she serves homemade ravioli that tastes exactly like my childhood. Pregnancy suits you. I feel good. Different, but good. Different how? Papa asks, though his tone suggests he already knows the answer. Responsible for more than just myself. I touch my belly unconsciously. Everything I do now affects someone else. Lucas and Papa discuss construction projects over wine, their conversation touching on legitimate business interests that don't require careful editing. Watching them, I'm struck by how similar they are despite their different backgrounds. Both men who built something from nothing through determination and strategic thinking. After dinner, Mama pulls me aside to the small garden behind the house where she grows herbs and vegetables. "Are you happy, Luna? Really happy? Not just comfortable?" It's a question I've been avoiding, even in my own thoughts. Happiness seems like a luxury I can't afford when every day brings new complications and potential threats. But contentment, purpose, security, these things I have in abundance. "I'm building something important," I tell her. "Something that will last beyond my lifetime. That feels more valuable than simple happiness." She nods, as if this makes perfect sense. "Your Nonna would be proud. She always said you had the strength for difficult choices." The drive home is quiet, both of us processing the normalcy of family dinner against the extraordinary circumstances of our daily lives. When we arrive at the house, security lights illuminate grounds that look peaceful, but are monitored by systems that could detect an approaching squirrel. "Your parents understand more than they let on," Lucas observes as we prepare for bed. "They're not naive. Papa's worked construction in New York for 30 years. He knows which projects get completed on schedule and which ones face unexpected complications. And your mother? Mama raised a daughter in America while maintaining Italian traditions. She understands adaptation and survival better than most people." Over the following months, as my pregnancy progresses and our business interests expand, I develop a deeper appreciation for the complexity of the world Lucas has created. It's not simply a criminal organization. It's a parallel economy that provides services, resolves disputes, and maintains order in communities where official institutions have failed. The legal work I do serves this structure by ensuring that legitimate operations remain genuinely legitimate, that disputes get resolved through proper channels when possible, and that people who find themselves caught in impossible circumstances have options beyond violence or submission. "You're building something new," Judge Hernandez tells me during one of our regular consultations. "A bridge between worlds that historically haven't communicated effectively." She's right, though I hadn't conceptualized it that way. My role has evolved beyond simple legal counsel into something like cultural interpretation, helping legitimate authorities understand criminal enterprises while helping criminal organizations navigate legitimate systems. When our daughter is born on a snowy February morning, the first thing I notice is that she has Lucas's eyes. Dark, intelligent, already seeming to assess her new environment with calculating intensity. We name her Isabella Maria, honoring both Italian tradition and American simplicity. "Bella," Lucas whispers as he holds her for the first time, his voice thick with emotion I've never heard before. "Perfect." The nickname suits her immediately. Even at 3 days old, she carries herself with a dignity that seems inherited rather than learned. Watching Lucas with her, I see glimpses of the man he might have been in different circumstances. Gentle, protective, devoted to something beyond power and control. The christening takes place at St. Patrick's Cathedral, with the same guest list that attended our wedding, plus several new faces representing alliances that have formed since then. Isabella sleeps peacefully through the ceremony, seemingly unbothered by the attention of judges, politicians, and businessmen whose interests span both sides of the law. "She's going to rule the world someday," Carla Benedetti predicts during the reception. "Look at those eyes. She already knows more than she's telling." It's a joke, but also a recognition of the intelligence that's already evident in Isabella's expressions. She watches everything, processes information with an intensity that seems beyond her age, and responds to different languages with the kind of immediate comprehension that suggests she'll be naturally trilingual. "What kind of world are we giving her?" I ask Lucas that evening, as we watch Isabella sleep in her nursery that's more secure than most bank vaults. "A complicated one," he admits, "but also a world where she'll have every advantage, every opportunity, and every protection we can provide." "Including the protection of being able to choose a different path?" His expression grows thoughtful. If she wants to be a professor or a doctor or an artist, she'll have our complete support. But she'll also inherit responsibilities that can't be completely abandoned. The choice will be how she fulfills those responsibilities, not whether to accept them. Standing in the soft glow of the nightlight, watching our daughter sleep peacefully despite the guards stationed throughout the house, I understand that this conversation about choice and responsibility will continue throughout Isabella's life. She'll grow up bilingual and bicultural, comfortable in boardrooms and courtrooms, understanding both the legitimate business world and the shadow economy that operates alongside it. But she'll also grow up protected, educated, and loved by parents who chose each other despite impossible circumstances and built something beautiful from a foundation of mutual respect and shared purpose. The waitress who once served tourists and dreamed of a simple legal career no longer exists. In her place stands Luna Santoro, wife, mother, attorney, and architect of bridges between worlds that most people never know exist simultaneously. It's not the life I planned, but it's the life I've built. And as Isabella stirs in her sleep, making soft sounds that could be Italian or English, or simply the universal language of contentment, I realize it's exactly the life I was meant to live. The transformation is complete, the future secured, and the next generation ready to inherit a legacy that spans continents and transcends the simple categories of legal and illegal, right and wrong, choice and obligation. In Lucas's world, everything is more complicated than it appears, including love, family, and the meanings we attach to the word home. But standing here in this beautiful, dangerous, impossible life we've created together, home feels exactly right.